I'm joined now by Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware, a co-chair of the Biden-Harris campaign's National Advisory Board. Senator Coons, let's get right to the question raised in this report of age. You heard the special counsel with that line, which will reverberate through this campaign, that the president is a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. The president disputes this. Are we going to hear the audio tapes of these interviews that it's based on? I mean, should the White House...
Jonathan, I don't know what the White House will or won't disclose, but here's what I know of the president I work with and alongside whom I serve. When I came back from the Middle East with a bipartisan group of 10 senators, we went to Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. I thought the president might have us over to the White House for 15, 20 minutes. He had us in at 7 o'clock at night. We sat down with his national security team, and for 2.5 hours... he went around the table and asked for our insights and our input, and then he led a masterful conversation about the challenges to our security, the pathway to peace, the difficulties with Iran and with its proxies. And as we walked out 2.5 hours later from the White House, I turned to one of my Republican colleagues who is not publicly a big fan of the president. And I said, "What did you think?" And he said, "That's incredible. This is a man who is sharp, who is on top of his game, who knows what's going on in the Middle East and around the world." And as he said in his press conference, we should be focused on two things. The outcome of this report, he was cleared completely, while Donald Trump faces 40 federal felony charges for obstruction of justice and refusing to protect our national secrets. And President Biden is accomplishing remarkable things for our country.
And I hear similar things from people who spent a lot of time with Biden recently, just like you said. And by the way, we're going to hear from Bibi Netanyahu later in the show. And he's had interactions, and you'll see what he says. But let's look at what happened when he came out. And public perception is what's important here in a campaign. Let's take a look at what happened when he came out Thursday night to defend himself on this and to insist that his memory is just fine and he's fit. But look at what happened.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in.
I mean, he's holding a press conference to push back against this notion that his memory's gone, and he's confusing the president of Egypt with the president
Right. Jonathan, you've been at this a long time. As you well know, small gaffes are a part of what all of us in public life do. Speaker Johnson of the House just confused Iran and Israel. He said, we are beginning to send aid to Iran. Donald Trump confused Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley. Here's what matters, not the occasional small gaffe. He had a 12-minute press conference where he was focused, engaged, purposeful, and all you're focused on is that 1 minute at the end. That's not what distinguishes him from his opponent.
That's not exactly fair. And I will concede there are many moments, and we have, Lord knows, talked about them, where Donald Trump seems wildly confused about a lot of things. But
untruthful and alarming in the things he said.
And we've focused on all of that. But this was not just one moment in the 12-minute press conference. I mean, take a look at what we saw just recently, a handful of other events. Take a look, a few more.
There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas. I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from France, looked at me.
I mean, you know, Mitterrand, whether he's from Germany or France, obviously he's from France, but he's been dead for 25 years. I mean, there are a number of these incidents, and they may be gaffes. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but this is what the American public is seeing, and it's raised concerns. Our poll shows over 80% responding, saying that they think that Biden is too old to serve as president again.
And Jonathan, if press coverage focuses relentlessly on things that don't represent Joe Biden's real body of work, you can push towards that kind of result. That poll should have been about who's actually working to secure our border. Joe Biden, who's worked across the aisle for months with a bipartisan group in the Senate, or Donald Trump, who is willfully killing the bipartisan border deal in the Senate, not because he wants to secure America, but to secure his own reelection. What that poll could have been about is who understands that our alliances keep us safer. Joe Biden, who's led 50 countries to come to the defense of Ukraine, or Donald Trump, who alarmingly last night bragged about a story where he claims he threatened a NATO ally to throw them to the Russian wolves if they didn't pay up. NATO isn't a protection racket, but it is a security alliance. So the substance, the difference, Joe Biden and Donald Trump and most elected officials make small gaffes just like the ones you just showed. That's not what matters. We are in a fight for the soul of our nation, and the idea that somehow Joe Biden forgot the date of his son's death is offensive and appalling. And what you should be focused on, in my view, what that poll should have focused on, what our nation should focus on,
can I stop you for a second, though, because
Donald Trump is undermining rule of law, democracy, and our safety as a nation.
But we do have polling on the issues you're discussing, and the polling shows widespread disapproval of how President Biden has handled the border and also the foreign policy. I mean, despite what you're saying.
Let's take that border issue, okay? After months of coverage about, disaster at the border, Joe Biden and a bipartisan group in the Senate did what the Senate is supposed to do. Negotiated, came to a tough deal. James Lankford, the most conservative adult human I'm friends with, worked his heart out with Senators Murphy and Sinema. We finally had a deal.
And Trump
why is it dead? Trump tanked it. He picked up the phone and killed the bill for his own reelection.
Before you go, I want to play you something that President Biden said back in March of 2020, right going into the Michigan primary, about what his term as president would be and what the future would be. Take a listen.
I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else. There's an entire generation of leaders you saw stand behind me. They are the future of this country.
So I've spoken to some of the leaders that were behind him who have privately said that they took that as basically a promise. He was going to serve one term, and he was going to be a bridge to the next leadership of Democrats. Why hasn't that happened, and should that happen?
Joe Biden ran to restore the soul of our nation and, frankly, to make sure that Donald Trump was not reelected. Donald Trump is again going to be the candidate of the Republican Party. Joe Biden is the one Democrat who has beaten him, who can beat him, and who will beat him. And if you look hard at his record of protecting our veterans, of making our country safer, of passing big bipartisan bills, 15 million jobs created, restoring manufacturing, the stock market at an all-time high, unemployment at a record low, his record is strong and deserves reelection.
All right, Senator Coons, thank you for joining us this morning. I really appreciate it.